Welcome to the Sustainability Showcase. I'm Yvette Richardson. I'm the Associate Dean for Undergraduate Education in the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, and I am here to introduce our speaker. So it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Denise Wardrop. Denice is a research professor in geography and the Associate Director for Riparian, a Penn State center where science informs policy and practice in wetlands ecology, landscape hydrology, and watershed management. Denice has been serving as the interim director of Engaged Scholarship for EMS, which has been lucky for us, for a year and a half, helping define the vision for student engagement, connecting students to opportunities, and working closely with the university-level student engagement network housed in this building. She was also teaching a first-year seminar in which students develop detailed engagement plans for their time at Penn State. And I think she'll be talking more about that in her presentation. An engaged scholarship experience, including 2 semesters of instruction and travel over the summer, where she took a group of students to Alaska and Peru, which I think is where the llamas come in. Before taking on her current role, Denise served for 4 years as the founding director for Penn State's Sustainability Institute, initiating the trajectory for Penn State to become a national model for sustainability in higher education. She serves as an invited member for the National Academy's Committee on Independent Scientific Review of Everglades Restoration Progress, and as a Pennsylvania governor's appointee for the Science and Technical Advisory Committee for the Chesapeake Bay program. Denise has authored or co-authored numerous publications from her research on wetlands and ecology, and has shown dedication to both research and instruction to the benefit of our students. She serves as a role model to many other faculty, so it is no wonder that she was awarded the Faculty Mentoring Award in the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences. And I am sure that her presentation today will inspire us all. So please welcome Denise Warren.
That was so nice, thank you. And thanks for clearing up the mystery about why the llamas are on there, because that'll come in later. So really, this is a design course, and I have 2 passions that kind of wonderfully collide in this world. And one is sustainability and the Sustainable Development Goals, to be more explicit. And the other one is students, because I truly believe that this institution has a couple big levers for changing the world. And I have a good fortune to work in 2 of them. One of them is discovery and generation of knowledge, and the other one is students. And I frankly think you're the biggest lever and the best bet we've got, so I'm particularly passionate about that. So I'm going to start off like any great educator. You have an assignment. You have 1 minute. It's a 1-minute essay, and I want you to answer the question, why are you here? And I don't mean at lunch. I mean whatever role you are fulfilling at Penn State at this point in your life. So go for it. I'm going to call on 2 or 3 of you, so it's going to be random. So begin now. You just answered individually. I want you to ponder it individually. If you're watching online, don't go get a cup of coffee, answer the question. Okay, you have about 20 seconds left. Okay? So, where are my students? Oh, come on. Can you answer your question? What's your answer to why are you here?
I'm a student at Penn State because I want to further my education, and specifically within earth sciences, I'm also in EMS, and someday I'd like to teach people as well about our planet and sustainability and preserving our resources.
Oh, great. So you have personal growth, sort of a community goal, and then you have a global. You're doing it for all those reasons, right? Okay. How about red is a great color. Makes you stand out.
Thank you. Yeah. That was definitely why I wore it. I'm here because I want to be close to the people I care about, and I care about also helping students navigate their path through the university. I'm an advisor here at SMEAL.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Okay. One more. Let's see. I'm going to come over here. You have a great smile, that's why.
So I'm here, I'm new staff at Sustainability Institute, and I'm here because I care about community. I think it's the kind of foundation and basis of how we make any kind of change, and so trying to help build community around sustainability.
Great. Okay. I'll stop there, but keep that answer to your question in mind. And so this is a wonderful quote. That's a difficult question. I didn't intend to send you into some sort of existential crisis, right? But we all grapple with that, and I think we grapple with that because why is like a piece of a puzzle, and we're really trying to fit in. We're trying to be the best people we can be, and we're trying to always understand where we fit into the general scheme of things. And this presentation is geared towards students, but I think it's relevant for almost everyone. And if we think about students, students are trying to figure out their why. They have reasons why they're here, and they come, and this is what they're faced with. They're faced with thousands of potential Penn State experiences, not one. Penn State is not one thing. And so there's probably 1 million iterations of those things that could combine to make their experience. And I'm really interested in how you get the most out of this time of your life, whether you're faculty, staff, or students. Not how much more can you cram in, but how are you going to get more out of whatever it is you choose to do. So how are you going to make that choice? How are you going to navigate your way through all those choices? And I would say that you heard it when people sort of mentioned, let's see if we can, there he goes, she goes. There are generally, when you ask people why they're here, they often come in one of three groups, or kind of three entryways, right, to life. Some of them want to grow a skill, right? They want to learn how to do such and such. They want to grow in a certain way, and that's kind of at an individual scale. Others have a project they want to do, right? And they want to know how they get it done. So I really want to design zero carbon buildings. I got to go learn the pieces I need so I can do that. And then a lot of other people go, I want to make the world a better place. I know I want to do that, but I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that, right? And often when you ask people, people that do those kinds of retreats say that, you know, interestingly enough, pretty much people fall into pretty evenly across those three categories. Well, I have a philosophy that I've sort of been working with in my life, and it's an open question. And the question is, what if you could line all of those up in a row? What if you could figure out a way to design a life where your personal growth is contributing to the community or the work you want to do that's also making the world a better place? And if you could line those things up, it's almost as if, has anyone been to the optometrist and they go, you know, which is better, right? right? Finally, when they click in a certain set of lenses, you go, I can see the bottom row, right? I can see my way through. So my hypothesis to you is, let's just hold this notion for a while. Is there a way that we could create that line of sight in our lives where we could line up personal growth, community growth, and a better world? So let's start at that outer limit about what the world, if we want to contribute to the world. And we're not quite sure how to do that. Well, the really great news is the world has sort of figured that out already, right? And so there were these things in 2000 that were called the Millennium Development Goals. And they were goals that a group of countries in the UN agreed to. We're going to do these certain things. We want to eradicate poverty. We want to decrease child mortality. We want to have more primary age children going to school. They had 8 goals, and in 2015, they assessed whether they had met them or not. And about 4 out of the 8 they had met. So did you know in 15 years, from 2000 to 2015, we halved the number of people globally in poverty. We decreased child mortality by 50%. We did some amazing things, but we hadn't done enough. And so in 2015, 193 countries got together, and they went to do 2 things. One was the Paris Climate Accord, right? And that was, okay, we've got some structural stuff to do because climate is going to make everything harder, right? Climate is the threat multiplier to these goals. So that was covered under one. The other one was, what are we going to do about what kind of world we want? 193 countries signed on to this, more than had ever signed on to anything in the history of the world. And they came up with what was different about these goals was a couple things. One is that they were universal. So the Millennium Development Goals only applied to developing countries. These apply to everybody. This says to the US, you've got a poverty problem and you need to solve it, okay? The other thing is that they were integrated. In other words, they were developed with the sense of some planetary constraints. So there were some environmental goals in there. And the third thing was that they were absolutely inclusive, which means everybody has to achieve them. We don't leave anybody behind. We don't get to say, well, the developing countries have met them, so we're good to go. No, everybody's got to meet them. So they're so interesting because they set this framework for how to contribute, really? And so there's 169 targets underneath those 17 goals. And I want to show you an example of one because there's a way for everybody to contribute if you're utilizing this framework. So let's go to one that's responsible consumption and production, right? And just look over those, let's list down and let's look at all the different disciplines that are captured under that one goal. The first one, efficient use of natural resources. Those are all the natural resource managers, right? Foresters, ecologists, wildlife people. The second one, global food waste. That's food systems, that's farmers, that's agricultural production. Sound management of chemicals, that's all your green chemistry, your chemists, your chemical engineers, right? Your material, the next one, reduce waste generation. That's all your materials scientists. Then we get to companies, adopt sustainable practices, integrate sustainability in their reporting cycle. That's business and finance. It goes on and on and on. You get to this one that's ecotourism. Now it's all the recreation, park, and tourism management people. So all that to say that there are room under this framework to find a way for everybody, anyone, to contribute. So they've made it a little easy. What about that second tier, right? So I'm surprised actually that, well, a lot of students say, listen, I want to get a job, right? I need to have a livelihood when I'm done. Well, you know what businesses want? The CEOs of 35 companies basically created this thing called the Business and Sustainable Development Commission. And they said, we're taking the SDGs as a way to map out our growth strategies. And if you map out a business's growth strategy, you're going to get a 10 to 15-year jump on your competitors, right? And by the way, you can't read these, but they identified the 60 biggest market opportunities related to delivering the global goals. That they could increase global GDP by at least 12 trillion US dollars by 2030 and create 380 million new jobs by 2030 if businesses used the SDGs as a template for growth. That's amazing. So there's a way now to use that global template, and then community or your business or whatever sector you're working in are lining up. What about your personal growth, right? Well, there's a lot of skills that you need to, a lot of competencies or areas you need to be able to contribute. And the Student Engagement Network that's in this building uses this language, right? So what kind of person, what kind of skills do you have to have, right, to be able to contribute in a new world? And there are things like, there's 5 of them, so there's professional development. Are you always asking yourself, what do I need to do? Do I need to learn how to better communicate? Do I know how to work on a team? Do I know what the different disciplines contribute? So that's professional development. There's civic engagement. Not only am I volunteering, but do I understand the notion of how I can best contribute to the community I'm in, right? How my skills make that community a better place, how I as an individual can contribute. That's civic engagement. This one is ethical reasoning. Can I spot ethical dilemmas, right? If I am asked to do an energy policy, right, for my community, am I aware of what access to energy issues there are, or is it affordable, right? So do I know how to resolve those ethical dilemmas in whatever I'm doing? This one is multicultural awareness, right, and has to do with diversity and inclusivity. Do I understand what everybody brings to the table and the importance of context? I'm a geographer. I think about context all the time, right? How I define and solve a problem is different depending on where I am in the world and the culture I'm sitting in. And finally, this great one is systems thinking and critical reasoning. So the story I like to tell about that is what is systems thinking? And so when I had the great good fortune of working in the Sustainability Institute, we had a group of students who came with a petition for compostable hot beverage cups, right? And said, well, we got 10,000 signatures on a petition. We want compostable hot beverage cups. And we said, well, we're not sure we can do that. Why can't you do that? I have 10,000 signatures. Because there's 2 end pieces to that story. First of all, they're more expensive. And purchasing here is not allowed to do anything that adds onto your tuition, right? We can't put the cost of anything on your backs. So they don't want to buy more expensive cups because they might have to raise your tuition. At the other end is whether the composting facility can handle the 3 million hot beverage cups that we generate every year. That's systems thinking. If you can't kind of figure out the 2 ends of that, we couldn't basically do compostable hot beverage cups. So that's systems thinking. So all of those things have to be in place. So let's say that there's this kind of language of personal growth now, right? It's not just I want to be a better person, or you can map experiences you might have on this kind of radar chart of these skills that we're saying you need these to be able to have impact in the world. You have to be able to do all those things. So I think it's possible to line those things up. I think it's possible for a clear line of sight between personal growth, contribution to your community, and contribution to the world. I think you can design a life or design your time at Penn State to do that. Right? I think it's possible. So now I'm going to talk about tools that I could give you to do that, or that we're working on doing that. Is that something you might be interested in? Okay. First of all, life is a wicked problem. Wicked problems are defined in a couple different ways. First of all, there is no one solution, right? The other one is that you don't have a lot of data. You don't have a lot of data on what's going to work for you and not in life, whether Penn State was the right choice. You didn't do it before. You had no data, unless you had enrolled a couple times, and I don't know, but so you don't have any data, and conditions change, right? Those are the characteristics of a wicked problem. And not wicked in terms of evil, but wicked in really hard to resolve and navigate. There's no one solution, right? That's a wicked problem. Well, there's a set of tools called design thinking that are really, really well suited for wicked problems. And what do I mean by design thinking, right? So an example of an engineering problem versus a design problem. An engineering problem, there's one best solution usually, and I have an engineering degree. I know about this. There's usually one best solution, and you gather data, right, to get to that solution. And you use data to get to that solution. So an example would be in that wonderful, Mac laptop I have, the hinges were an engineering solution, an engineering problem, right? How do I get the best long-lasting hinge? It was a design problem? When Mac went to make the first laptops, Macs were click and point, right? And you needed a mouse. And they go, well, what's the point of a laptop if you got to have a mouse? That was a design problem. There wasn't one solution out there, right? And it wasn't pre-existing. Nobody knew. That's a design problem. I would maintain your life's a design problem, right? Not an engineering problem, right? It's a design problem. And these are the tools that designers use all the time. And I'm going to show you 3 of them, right, in action. I did them with a first-year seminar last semester. So I'm going to talk about curiosity. I'm talking about curiosity is just, increasing the probability that you're going to be lucky. Right? Be curious about stuff. The second one is really important, and it's bias to action. What does that mean? That means you don't try to sit there and think your way, you act your way. You don't sit there and spend hours and hours and hours devising the perfect life plan. That's pretty risky. What if you get to the end of it and it doesn't work? Why not try it out in little chunks? You think you want to work at Disney World? Maybe you ought to volunteer in a theme park over the summer to see if you like being around kids, right? That's prototyping. You're going to build stuff, and you're going to fail sometimes, and you're going to fail fast, right? That's prototyping. Reframing. Are you even have you framed the issue correctly? Maybe you're not thinking about the problem correctly. You need to reframe. I'll talk about that. At the end, I'll talk about awareness, just to be cognizant of what's going on and how you're reacting. And the last one is none of us do this alone, right? There are some things, a painter, okay, he can make a painting alone, but the person who invented the iPhone, designed the iPhone, sure as heck didn't do it alone, right? So all of this is radical collaboration. Use yourself and use other people, because nobody gets through life alone. Okay, how about reframing? And this is, I'm sorry, mostly to the students, directed to the students, but I found a lot of applicability in my life with this as well. So, if you are successful, you will be happy. That's not true, right? You will be happy if you are living a life that suits you. So that's the challenge. And some of these it's too late for me. I'm 61. I'm going to assume it's not too late for me. You know, I'm doing this. I'm trying to still design what I've got left of my life. It's never too late for a good life. Right? This one, you know what? I was guilty of telling my own children this, right? I need to find my passion, make a plan, and execute it. Passion is not something, it's not a treasure hunt. It is not buried somewhere on campus, and your job is to go dig it up and find it, right? If you asked only 1 out of 5 people, the ages of 12 to 26, can identify a passion. Right? So if I'm telling you that, 80% of you don't have anything to go on. Right? God love you if you've known what your passion is. Right? But I didn't. Passion is something that you develop. Usually starts with curiosity. And you notice that you're getting energy around it, and you start to develop a passion. Passion is developed around something that you've been curious about. So, and you don't just make a plan and execute it. That's not how that works. My degree will determine my career. Only 27% of college graduates work in the career area that their degree was in. Right? 27%. I have an engineering degree, and I'm doing engaged scholarship. You know, who would have thunk that, right? So it's not a one-to-one pathway. Okay, so what's a tool to find out? Does anybody know what this is? Because I'm a complete space nerd. It's the Orville. Thank you. The new Seth MacFarlane's new Star Trek, kind of. All right. Which planet are you curious about? And there's this kind of wonderfully simple thing that, doesn't this sound great? A good time journal, right? And what I have my students do is they fill this out for about a week. And I don't mean accounting for every minute of the day, but they list their general activities, and there's 2 things that they're trying to pay attention to here. One is called an engagement meter. How engaged did I feel when I was doing that activity? Was time standing still for me? Was I really immersed in it? And the other one is energy. Did it suck the life out of me, or was I jazzed when I was done with it, right? And so this is an example, right? I volunteered at the student farm. I was really engaged, and you know what? I had more energy when I got done with that activity than I had when I started. I did a group project for class. I was kind of engaged, but I'm a little neutral on the energy, right? Mentored a fellow student, high on engagement, but wow, am I exhausted? Hosting events for a club, lost energy, and I'm a little neutral on engagement. They would do this, fill out those little meters, and at the end of the week, they would kind of go, you know what? If I'm both engaged and I got energy from it, I check the box for flow. You know what flow is, right? Has anybody been in flow? Right? When time stands still, you feel like you have the mastery to be doing what you're doing. You're not anxious. You're not bored. You're at that perfect place. That's flow. So curiosity, you're looking for what gives you flow. When do you feel flow? And then you might investigate that a little bit. Like, what is it about the student farm, that makes me feel flow? The second one is prototyping, right? So you are here. Basically, this is the simple thing. Try stuff. Just try stuff. See how it works out, and then you go back to you try other stuff. You modify your plan. So let me show you what I mean by that. So let me jump forward a little bit, right? So it's this idea that don't feel like you have to, devise the perfect 4-year plan for your time at Penn State and invest all of that. That's a big risk. Break it up into little chunks. So this is a way to kind of find ways to prototype, and this is called an Odyssey plan. And these things are, I'll give you a resource at the end. It's from a course, I hate to say their name, but it's a Design Your Life course that was at Stanford, right? So this is a tool they use, and I used it with my students, and I said, pick a sustainable development goal that speaks to you, right? And now draw an Odyssey plan about what are all the things during your Penn State experience that you would put together that would mean you could really contribute to that SDG when you were done. And these are some of the ones my students came up with. And so let me talk to you about this one. You take a risk when you do this. This is a person that's going to transfer out of EMS, right? I had EMS students. This person said, you know what? The one that really calls to me is peace, justice, and strong institutions. And what sort of prototyping little things? I don't know about that. I'm a freshman. What if I transfer and I find out that's not what I like to do at the end? So what are all the different things I can kind of try out? Well, I can join the Lion Caucus, kind of see how politics works. And if that kind of speaks to me, what would I need to do in that kind of role? There are different courses that would explore different aspects. I'll go do global brigades to see if the global scale kind of speaks to me, right? So, and what you do is you formulate these out, and there's all these little prototyping exercises, and this isn't static. You may get here and find out, right? I'm going to modify this. I'm going to redraw the plan. I learned something, okay? What do I need? She has questions, right, that she kind of needs to prototype. So how can I instill change while I'm still here? How do I get experience in instilling change? Well, I go back here, and maybe that's what Lion Caucus is about. This is another one. This is a material science who wasn't as artistically inclined as my other student, Autumn, was, but he's basically interested in responsible consumption and production, and he's going, can I do something in biopolymers, right? Can I find a research project in that? You know, which companies are doing that? How could I kind of test out whether that's viable? Here's another one. This is by somebody who was an eco-rep, Isabella, right? And she's got responsible consumption and production, but she's got a completely different path. And she's actually thinks, maybe I'd really like to work on transportation. So do you know what she put in her plan? Can I intern for Cata Bus, since that's a form of mass transportation, while I'm here in State College? So see how that works? How you put little prototyping things in your plan. There's also, this is mainly for the students, but Yvette is here and could tell you there's often programs in colleges, EMS has one called MSAGE, that creates what I call pull. It recognizes the fact that you're trying to put together your educational experience in a way that suits you. Okay? So a PepsiCo executive told me, I said, what do you want out of my students? And he said 3 things. I want them to have recognized expertise in their discipline. I want them to know how to apply that for impact in the world. And I want them to do it in a way that they're a good ancestor. Right? MSAGE is a college program that basically gives you formal recognition of that and gives you support to kind of develop that. And so you can ask Yvette about that, but look in your college if there's something that really helps you put together an engagement plan or design at least your educational experience. And I can just say that I did all these exercises along with my students, and I had the time of my life. So it's never too late, right, to do all these things. The thing that I would like to finish up with, basically, let's just check my time, is, you know, this is where the Llamas come in. I've taken students on these experiences, and I have to tell you that if you come to me in a job interview and I said, what's this thing you went to Peru? And you go, I went to Peru. It was really awesome. What? You know, I built houses in Mississippi over alternative spring break. It was cool. If you can't articulate your story, it's lost. You won't remember who you are or why you're here. So, you know, I think it's our role to help you do that, but please understand, you have to be able to articulate what this did to you as a person. And so, I would ask you to just kind of, for 4.5 minutes, think about this. This is my students that I took to Peru have to do a research product. They do a research poster, but they also have to do what's called a digital story. And I want you to pay a couple attention to this. It's a student, Lydia Scheel, and I want you to pay attention to the technical information that she's bringing in, a story of personal transformation she's bringing in, and who she's speaking to, who you think her audience is. Let's see if this works. Oh. Oop. Wait a second. Let me see if I can get it to play from here.
The year is 2016. I am a millennial in college, exploring in places so pristine my nose is to the ground, taking in every inch of wonder. But not all is so beautiful. People around the world have been made refugees because of hundreds of tyrants. If my university of 46,000 students were like the rest of the world, more than 375 of who we are would be refugees. Because according to the UN, 1 in every 122 humans is now displaced from their home. The year is 2050. I am middle-aged, seeking the final move in my career, exploring the possibility of once more traveling the world when I retire. People around the world have been made refugees because of one tyrant: climate change. If my 600,000 strong alumni network of the future were like the rest of the world, more than 12,000 of who we are would be climate change refugees. Because according to economists, climate change will displace 1 in every 50 humans by the year 2050. America is currently seeing the cost of climate change refugees. This summer, I traveled to Alaska with a group of researchers. Villages within the state have already begun to consider options of moving away from the coastlines. Our research was conducted in Juneau, the capital city of Alaska, but across the state, multiple towns are eroding away. Threatened by rising sea levels, the city of Shaktuluk could need $200 million to relocate its people away from their homes and into the state. 250 miles along the coast, the town of Newtok asked for a $62 million grant from the federal government to relocate its people from the coastline, where climate change is also forcing people inland. But to be clear, this natural disaster does not just affect Alaska, but the entire United States. And that $62 million the village of Newtok asked for was not granted to them, and instead awarded to other places also facing the challenges posed by climate change. All of the cities I flew through to do research this summer, and even the city I'm moving to after graduation, could all be flooded by a sea level rise of 25 feet. I fear for the loss of what climate change refugees will leave behind. I think of the people I met this summer, and the artifacts, the music, and the culture they have known for centuries that will all surely be diminished once they are forced to relocate. Their shops, their trails, their land, uninhabitable. Their industries, their livelihoods, their traditions, gone. The total cost of climate change refugees could never be fully realized. Every choice comes at a price, and this summer made me realize how many costly decisions we must make to stay resilient against climate change. Our path will not be easy, but I am hopeful. I have seen engineers, scientists, thinkers, and planners come together over a common goal. I don't know if I will ever need to relocate because of climate change, but I have already found my own refuge in people who share my cause.
So I will tell you that I had 8 seniors in my cause class, and 4 of them credit their digital story with getting the job they ultimately got because they could articulate what had happened to them, how they had transformed and changed, and how that was transferable to their new job or situation. So I would encourage you to learn how to tell your story. Let me tell you about, right? And you're the author of that. So I'd just like to finish up with resources. If you're interested in any of those kind of design your life tools, there's a wonderful book and they have worksheets online. Yvette is doing a wonderful job with the MSAGE program, I think, integrating, teaching students how to kind of put together an engagement plan and how we help them and support them. Del Bright is the Giles Writer in Residence over at Earth and Mineral Sciences who does digital storytelling. You know, how do you layer different media? How do you find your voice? Stevie Rocco is an instructional designer. She helped me with she has a lot of interest in the design your life process. Mike Nasri, who taught with me. Mike Zeman, who's here in the Student Engagement Network. And for students, when you apply for a Student Engagement Network grant, you actually have to tell them how the experience will grow you in those 5 growth areas I talked about. Doug and Peter at the Sustainability Institute, there are over, 300 classes with sustainability and sustainable development and over 100 clubs and organizations. Doug can help you find them. There's a wonderful guy that works in town, Spud Marshall, that does a lot of these kind of design your life retreats and conversations. But most of all, you and your very well-selected design team, right? You have 98,783 potential colleagues at Penn State. You know, choose wisely. And actually just to tell you the difference actually between having a map and wayfinding. And what do I mean by wayfinding? Probably my favorite pair in history is Lewis and Clark, right? Life, you don't get a map to life. You don't put a destination into the GPS, the life GPS, and you get a set of right, step-by-step instructions. It's not how it works. What you do is you wayfind. So Lewis and Clark didn't have any map when they set out, right, to the northwest. What they did have was a compass. And they said, are we headed in the right direction? Are we making the best decision for the next step forward that we have the information to make? And I would just say life is a wayfinding adventure. And so may you have a joyful wayfinding. So thank you very much.
Are there any questions for Denise?
None?
Any comments?
So I also got engaged in this idea of engaged scholarship, I'm a PhD student here, and I'm seeing the value of this work here, but there are a lot of challenges as well. So I did my bachelor back in Iran, my home country, and we were much more focused, and we didn't have much time, thinking about what, because there were a lot of requirements, and back home the school system demands you to, if you're going to engineering, you have a really strong background in math. And here I see undergrads, and I know that there is a challenge, students, they don't like I have seen the issue, attracting a student in engineering and make them actually enjoy those topics. So part of issue that maybe the difference, I don't have any study, the difference I see is here, people struggle a lot with this big, huge, the whole, the big systems, and not, putting their focus on just one part of the work, and they end up, gaining a lot, but not be expert in one, specific thing. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think you're very insightful, right? That is a problem, and something I said in the beginning. Sometimes we have in this country a tendency to make students believe that they just need to put in more stuff, when I'm trying to figure out a way that how do you make choices that make you get more out of the few things that you can fit in. And I think that there's also more thought has to go into what's the connection between what we're doing kind of academically and what are those other experiences kind of leveraging and making stronger, right? So that it's all working together, so that if you're an engineer, you understand why an experience of doing something for Thon is making you a better engineer, right? So how is that activity helping you know how to be able to apply your disciplinary expertise, your engineering knowledge, for impact in the world, and how to do it in a way that makes you a good global citizen. So I think we're working on those linkages, but I think what I'm trying to do is give students the tool. I can't design your life for you, right? And so how are you going to design your educational experience in a way that has meaning for you and what you want to do? Does that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of my questions as well. I am passionate about this climate change, discussion, and I love this idea of us getting together and motivating each other. But at the same time, I'm saying I left my country because there were no jobs, and we are seeing a lot of, challenges of climate change. But taking students from in U.S. to places that they are suffering and telling them you should care, I don't know how much effective it can be, because we are living we don't feel it every day, and it's hard to keep that connection. I myself usually forget I think that I'm privileged now. I don't have challenges, but a lot of people in my country they cannot forget about it. And and sometimes I question my true intention. Is it just me finding a way to find a place in the world, get more right. And more, or do I care actually?
Right.
And it's maybe it's a question I'm struggling. It's just
well, and I think that's one. For example, that's really the one of the personal competencies of ethical reasoning, right? And so, how do we get experiences that also help students develop that part of themselves? Is part of it. So, I have a question for the students. Was that helpful? Yeah. How is it helpful?
Well, I graduated in May, and I graduated from EMS in geosciences, and then I got an AmeriCorps position with the borough, and we're focused on sustainability. So I kind of went through, the diagram that you had presented about like, you know, studying geochemistry and then being in the position of using my discipline to now try to bring something to the borough, but also trying to consider the way the world's moving, what we need to do with sustainability, and how climate change kind of umbrellas all of us into this same pool of having to deal with it. And I think that I struggled with a lot of the things that you had brought up, and about like, how am I going to use my profession to be a good citizen, and to also like connect with the community and things like that. And I thought it was a really good presentation. And yeah, I think it was just a really good presentation.
So for you, the glasses, you can see the bottom line, right? All the lenses hooked up for you. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was really helpful. Even now, as I like have my AmeriCorps position, and then I started to apply to grad school, and I'm thinking about what I want to do in the future, and all of these things. But I think they're important to consider. I think that we all have individual value that we can use to kind of be this collective entity. Yeah, but I just wanted to comment. It was a really good presentation.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah.
I was wondering how you would approach personal transformative storytelling.
Wow, that's a good question. How do I approach it? I think that those growth areas, I think, first of all, it helps to find language for things you don't have language for yet. So when I started to see competencies or growth areas, like when somebody went, oh, you know, there's ethical reasoning, there's, you know, multicultural awareness, I went, oh, that's what I'm doing for my students. And then I started to build a syllabus around those things. So how are different parts of my syllabus actually developing those competencies in my students? So I would say my first step has been to look for language for things that are sort of amorphous to me. And once I have language, I'm better able to storytell. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you.
Hmm?
So I guess this is on. I guess, you know, I am not as articulate as that woman that gave the video, and I'm 35, I have graduate education, my glasses are working in terms of aligning everything professionally. So I'm kind of trying to, you know, reflect and echo back, you know, well, it's never too late, and as well as the wayfaring, you know, wayfinding types of things, like it never ends. So part of this is like, after this, we don't all have to be as articulate as that person, and even after that, it's, you know, you still have to keep going in some ways. So I guess I'm wondering, like, without trying to put you on the spot completely, but like, what's that nugget of wisdom of when you feel stuck, or when you're trying to remind yourself of those design thinking principles of reframe or prototype something? What does that feel like, to know to always go back to it, or just to try something else and keep going?
Wow. Thanks, Sarah.
No problem.
I would say that it is helpful for me, the part of the design thinking that there's a couple of the design thinking things I really, really like. And I had a personal example of this, right? I have always thought I wanted to work for the Nature Conservancy. I saw the perfect job, you know, posting, right? I spent gobs of time writing my application, right? You think it would have occurred to me to call somebody up at the Nature Conservancy and say, what's it like working at an NGO, right? Do you really get to work at the depth of science? I think they do, right? So I think one of the things to me that really speaks is the prototyping. You know, just start moving. I overthink all the time, right? And it's like, just get out of your own head and try something, right? And see if it works. So you know what? I called up somebody at the Nature Conservancy 2 weeks ago. I found out all kinds of stuff. I had no idea, absolutely no idea. And I just called somebody up and said, tell me your story. Like, how'd you get there? What do you like working at? I wasn't asking for a job. I was just saying, what's it like there? So that. The other thing about design thinking is reframing the problem, right? And there's this thing in design thinking where there are some gravity problems, right? Gravity problems are the ones that, you know what, you're not fixing gravity, right? So what's kind of a way to reframe the problem so that you're not fighting gravity, something like that. And I think the other one is, I actually think it's a challenge for your generation more than it was for mine, but there's a fear of failure, you know, and you have to develop some failure immunity, right? So I had my students do this really interesting exercise. I had them keep failure logs for a week. And then they came and they got in pairs, and I said, okay, failures come in 3 flavors. There's the screw-ups, you know, you looked at the wrong week in your calendar and you missed something. Well, you just, you know, forget about it, right? There's weaknesses, right? Things that you're not going to really change, so you try to find workarounds. Like, I don't like doing administrative stuff, but I can't afford to let it pile up on my desk to where I miss something. So I go to the coffee shop once a week just to do my administrative stuff, right? So there's weaknesses. Then there's that category of things where, you know what, I'm going to pull some learning out of this because I want to know what I can learn so that that doesn't happen again. And the point of that is that none of us, all of us are going to fail, you know, all of us are going to fail. But how do you not get bogged down with that? So how do you learn to fail fast, and know what to do with your failures? That helps me a lot. But yeah, I overthink. So, you know, the prototyping thing for me is good. And by the way, you know, no, not everyone's as articulate as Lydia, but I gotta tell you, out of my class, it's not like that was up here and the others were down here. It was like when people have tools for reflection, you know, they were told to pay attention to what is a question you ended up asking yourself, what's your point of view, who do you want to speak to? And, you know, the learning started popping out, right? So really, you have to be able to articulate what happens to all of us, right? So, anyway, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, wow.
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to follow up on what you said about failing. It just reminded me of a conversation I had with a friend's son who's 11 recently. And I see him all pretty regularly. And his name's Isaac. And so I said recently, Isaac, how was school today? It was fine. I said, what did you fail at? And he looked at me like I was speaking Martian. And I'm like, well, you realize everything in this room was a failure at once. It's not like the person who designed this chair just said, hey, I'm going to design this chair. And the first, you know, they designed it and voila.
Yeah.
Are you kidding? This was thousands of hours and time and effort and preparation. Because that, I think you're right. I think this generation is afraid to fail. And that's a failure on us as a society,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, there's often like, think how many failures had to happen for you to have an iPhone, right? So, good point. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, well, amazing. Thank you so much, Denise, and thank you all for coming out. I know it's a busy weekend, but I'm glad you all made it. Just a few reminders, everything in your box is compostable, so you can just put it in the compost bin on the way out. And then next week we have Bob Inglis, who is a former Republican representative, to talk about climate change and the role of politics in that. It should be a really interesting one, so I hope to see you all there. Have a great weekend.